All right, and 3, 2, 1. Welcome to LibernetLIVE once again. Libernet is a project that attempts to marry blockchain and blockchain technology along with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and books and publishing and the expansion and liberation of human knowledge. And I'm very gratefully joined today with Indy. Hello, Indy. How are you doing? How's your Sunday going?
Fantastic. It's dreary and overcast in a way that like means a good crop for my little backyard urban garden.
Lovely.
So it's like my radishes are very happy for the moisture.
Good. We've got one going on. Well, God, last year, man, it's like, it's lovely, but like, you know, if when it's like proper like hot and drowsy, you know, it's just such a chore to like water them every day for months, and you're not even sure you're gonna get anything at the end. But like, hey ho, it's a good practice, man. It's a good practice to do that. Yeah, it's quite sunny today here actually. Yeah, we were just before we were talking about you know, what you do, and we kind of touched on the topic of like, you know, the crime, the crime culture in New York City, which is where you're based, right? And how it fascinates me. And I know I listened to a lot of bands that were part of like the no wave scene in New York at the time, and that shit just fascinates the fuck out of me. And like their response to this kind of very glitzy new wave kind of, you know, pop star, you know, colors and shaking jazz hands that was coming out in the 80s, and then there was this real dark underbelly going on, and this music genre was like a response to that, and that whole thing just fascinates me, and I would love to have been in New York at the time to sort of see it, you know.
You're reminding me instantly of a good friend of mine. He was a drummer in our prison band. And he used to play, you know, at CBGB and all the cool spots, and you know, old, just tough as nails guy. And he'd be like, man, you should have seen the scene back in the day, man. These kids don't know what they're talking about. Like, he was just so tough. Like he could like, if he had just his head as a weapon, he could like hurt somebody. I think.
Sure,
like, just, but absolute sweetheart, like just deep down in his soul, you know. He writes poetry now, and he keeps submitting. I keep trying to find a way to get his work out to the world. He's still locked up.
Yeah. Well, this is like largely what your sort of what your mission statement is, and what you're sort of working on pragmatically, and things you can do at the moment, and things that you'd like to do in the future, I suppose. And
right, I mean, there's massive hurdles, right? So we in the US, there's two sides to the hurdle. One is that, you know, we love a good serial killer or mass murderer or like really cool figure. It's like, oh, you know, we want to explore this monsterness, and kind of we're attracted to it in a weird way, as a culture. And then we also don't care about, you know, the plight of everyday people who are, you know, caged essentially for long periods of time, long before any kind of practical need for them being locked up exists. And so I think I don't know what I'm doing in this thing. I don't know how to solve those problems of perception. But I do know that many of the people, everyone who's ever gone into prison, musicians, writers, people who run workshops, people who go in, are like, wait, these are normal people. Like, what are we doing? Like, this is stupid. And then, yeah, so I think, and the other side, which no one really knows about, is how prison really runs as a business in the US. We talk about it. Oh yeah, it's, you know, the new Jim Crow and like an extension of slavery and so on and so forth. But what it means in practical sense is that, you know, I just did a workshop recently with a writer who was incarcerated, a woman, and she wrote in her journals about some of the thoughts she had, the feelings she had, some of the abuses by the guards. And they ended up confiscating her journal, using it as evidence, putting her in solitary confinement for an extended period of time. Eventually it blew up into this whole big crazy thing. But the fundamental act, she was like, I just want my journal back. I just want my writing back. And you don't have a right to your own writing when you're behind bars. And I remember reading, like, I don't know, there was like this dude, Prince Charles, he was locked up in France in, like, I don't know, medieval times.
Centuries ago, yeah.
Right. And I read his work, and I remember being stunned by the clarity of thought, the expansiveness of his philosophical sort of understanding of both his predicament and what led him to be there. And I was like, wow, that in context, we know we can learn from people who are in these monasteries called prisons. And so, yeah, part of my journey is to like help open pathways, I think, for more people who are in these monasteries to have their work shared with the world.
Absolutely. I mean, for one, I'm flabbergasted by the incarceration rate in the US, and also how much it is run like a business. It's crazy. I'm not sure what the rules are here in regards to how whether you can keep your writing here. I think you can. I mean, in terms of being able to actually, like, you know, self-actualize and express yourself even in behind bars, I think it's I mean, I find it absolutely insane that you can't do that. That should be like a human right, like in the same way that, like, you know, like using the, I mean, you know, that's just, it's not like with a lot of creatives, it's not a choice. They can't switch their writing on and off, you know. It is something essential.
What's incredible is that, you know, the organization I work for is a nonprofit. They're affiliated with an international organization that works with writers all over the world, and, you know, looking at issues of freedom of expression. And outside of the US, many writers are jailed for their writing. Inside the US, most of our writers are jailed. So it's like a coin flip. Here we're allowed freedom of expression theoretically, faced with a sort of soft censorship of you know, cultural expectations and a sense of what you can and can't say. In Egypt, in Myanmar, in Cuba, even, you know, you could go to jail for writing a song. You can go to jail for, you know, publishing a piece. In China. And so we have this idea that there's broad freedom of expression in the US, but it doesn't exist, certainly not for everyone, and not in the ways that we think.
I think I might have lost you.
Oh,
that's all right. I've got you back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah. In a lot of other places, you get jailed for writing. You know, like another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know an Egyptian writer who would smuggle out the writings of himself and a collection of other writers that they associated with in prison. Oh, that's another thing about prison that people don't often talk about is self-organization, and sort of there's a sort of every man for themselves or gang culture often you see, but rarely do you see like pro-social, community-based, prisoner-led organizations and activities. And so I know collectives of artists, there are writers collectives all over the US of people who, against all odds, get together and kind of do the kind of things that we're trying to do, which kind of brings me to blockchain and this project and why I was so excited by it. It's kind of, it's a fuzzy area, but I was like, what would it mean for people to have a mnemonic phrase and the ability to save money while you're in prison, so you come out and you have a livelihood. It just was a thought. I know so many artists who are like, they have no way of contributing to their families. They're basically a burden on everyone who loves them. even while they're inside. They will be a burden on everyone who loves them when they come out.
Yeah, yeah.
And like many other artists, they have a skill that they've honed and would love to be able to use it. Anyway, I think there are deeper questions here too, and I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on when prison is one lens of looking at a symptom of what I consider a larger problem. We often frame it in terms of Black and brown people and marginalized people, but I tend to not view it in such simplistic terms. So I'm creating a conversation here, and forgive me.
No, it's fine.
But I look at it from an economic lens, which is why I'm glad you brought up the previous talk you had about the dollar. You know, 80% of our economy is service sector work here in the US. So I work at McDonald's, and I, you know, I'm a barista at a Starbucks. I'm a store clerk or something like, and then the rest of the jobs are like really weird, ineffectual information technology jobs where you're like, you know, doing spreadsheets and I don't know, filing widgets. So I think about what it means to reconnect both to land, the cycles of life. And I grew up in an urban context. All this is sort of foreign to me. And connect to real meaning and community in a way that I know.
Well, I think, yeah. Well, for one, I think, I mean, I love what you're saying about the sort of the unlikelihood of sort of creating a community based and sort of things. I mean, I don't know. I've never been to America, but I've found like it does seem to be kind of like much more an every man for itself kind of culture than a lot of other places. Like I lived in Scandinavia for a while, and they're very socialized. They're very they're very kind of you know, sort of we're very communitarian. We're all in this together. I mean, I found sort of problems in that as well. But then again, it's you know, I need a lot more. I need a lot more data because, you know, because Finland's only been a country. I lived in Finland for a year. Finland's only been a country for 100 years. I went to. I'm writing an essay for Pizza DAO at the moment. I went to Christiania in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I found that very interesting. They are a community, and they sort of run things on their own. Police don't go in there. They sell, you know, marijuana. They sell weed, like, you know, jars of it down the street. It's not legal there, but like, there's just this understanding between this community and the rest of Copenhagen. When Copenhagen's not by any means, but Copenhagen's great. But it was just this sort of really strange, uncanny feeling I found when I sort of discovered that, you know, it was as if hegemonic culture wasn't watching. And when I entered the Christiania, it was as if I had no script or role that was chosen for me to act in a certain way. I could just sort of think and speak and act freely. And I found that very uncanny. It was very, but in a really wonderful way. And I'm writing about these DAOs and how I'm sort of getting a similar kind of feeling when we're sort of just like, wait, who's telling us what to do? You know, even implicitly. I find, and absolutely, I find what you say very true about we are largely products of our environments, you know, and those environments can include, you know, the monetary systems that control institutions. And when you have a dollar that is so corrupt and so destructive in you know, both, you know, the military industrial complex and how it coerces third world countries into using it, like in terms of Libya trying to reintroduce the gold standard. The US would, you know, like, we can't have that. Let's frame Gaddafi, you know, and you can have the opinions and whatever, but like, it's so interesting to see blockchain as an alternative to sort of monetary systems. And I agree with you. I think race is an issue, but I think when I was talking yesterday to Jeffrey, you know, you could actually eliminate racism from every single person's mind, and systemic racism would still exist structurally, like in the architecture, and that architecture is largely determined by money. In terms of where the business is, where the high-rise flats are, where the villas are, and if you were to actually, you know, suggest a new system of doing things, which is determined by money, you undercut everything else, and that's why blockchain is so interesting to me. I'm not saying that blockchain is you know is the established, oh, here it is, here's the solution. It is a we are in the fetal stages of a new form of monetary distribution and representative value coming in, and that's what I find so interesting about it.
Yeah, that reminds me of the work of the late great economist Elinor Ostrom, who wrote about cooperation and common goods and the challenges of sort of creating sustainable systems that utilize these principles in autonomous and local ways. And I know that's sort of a mouthful. She focused heavily on the tragedy of the commons, and I look at my hood and the every man for itself culture. It's, you know, it's the local drug dealer selling drugs, doing a thing, following what the pathway is absolutely set out for them to be successful in their value system. It's the local assembly person who I spoke to outside of my post office, and I asked him what economic recovery looks like for him for our neighborhood, and he's like, oh yeah, we have to, you know, get our small businesses back up and running. And I'm like, our small businesses are nail salons, hair salons, dollar stores. Like that's not a small business. That's basically selling crap. And he's like, well, we gotta get our foot in the door before we consider, you know, sustainability or real flourishing, connected, restorative businesses. And I was like, I don't know, maybe we could jump past the stupid merchandise to heading forward. So Eleanor's work looks at the fundamental difficulties of establishing trust, and that's essentially one of the things that blockchain does. I had a experiment last year where I'm broke, so like I'm not one of these crypto guys who like hopped on early and made $1 bazillion. I have like nothing. I make a lot of art. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing also. So, but I wanted to purchase a CryptoVoxels parcel and like put some of the artists in there with shows that I like, and like just do small time people who like aren't trying to be fancy, because I'm not fancy. And so I was like, hey, why don't we all pull our money together? And I couldn't find a way to do it well or easy in a way that people would trust me. Even if I did a DAO, there's still an element of trust that people, in order to do an initial investment and hop on, people have to find a way to give that first trust. And you know, having been in and around lots and lots of con artists for many, many, many years, I think that's another thing about prison that comes back in to bring it full circle, is that the people who are well known and respected in prison, literally, they always say like the only thing you have is your word. And we picture it as some kind of like den of thieves sort of thing, but it's much, much more like a rigidly constructed system of trust where everyone knows the people who cheat. There is no hiding. You can't disappear anywhere. There is no anonymity. Everyone knows the people who do what they say they're going to do or who are accountable. So I found that in this space, it's the real commodity is trust. And Elinor Ostrom, going back in my crazy rant now, I feel really psychotic. I sound more like Eric Stowe right now. That's a shout out to his crazy mastermind, hop, skip, and jumping. How do I convince people in my hood to trust me? And if I can't convince people in my hood to trust me, what chance do I have of building anything? Anyway, long story short, 5 people trusted me and we pooled our money together. I had to purchase the CryptoVoxels parcel myself. They had to trust that I would put this in a multi-sig. I put it in the multi-sig. I paid exorbitant gas fees to add all of them to the multi-sig. I lost, I don't know, $200 I didn't have easy access to on the whole thing. But here we were, 5 people with co-ownership of a CryptoVoxels parcel. And that was last November.
Can you define what a crypto voxel parcel is? I'm not too keyed up on that terminology.
Oh, cool. Yeah, if you imagine Minecraft, virtual world, open, that has is completely run on the blockchain and with code as its back end, and the land, each parcel is auctioned off and new ones are minted with regularity. The average parcel price is about 1 ETH for a parcel. And then you can build on your parcel. You can open it up as a sandbox so anyone can build in your parcel, or you can set who you want to build. There are many, many, many galleries of various sorts in CryptoVoxels. So if I have non-fungible, yeah,
so somewhat like a virtual gallery in some ways, is that correct?
Very much like a big, large, connected, communal, very large communal collection of virtual galleries. There are weekly events in parcels with hundreds of people in attendance. It's got a big wearables culture where people make wearables that you can get in. And I think one of the interesting things about the CryptoVoxels community, there are many other virtual worlds, Sandbox, which is coming out, which is more gaming oriented, Decentraland, Somnium Space. But in terms of blockchain metaverses, CryptoVoxels has like a sort of gritty, slightly ghetto vibe that I dig. It's I don't know if that explains it, but we did it. We did this thing, and it felt like a massive accomplishment. And every time I see this happen in the crypto space, I realize it's not about the parcel. It's not about the rise in value of ETH. It's about this fundamental thing. And I know how valuable this trust thing is. Like literally, my life has depended on it many, 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 many times. And so I don't take that for granted.
I think because I mean the whole concept of anarchy and common goods, and your author, I've forgotten her name, what's it?
Eleanor Ostrom.
Eleanor Ostrom. Yeah, she sounds like when she talks about common goods and stuff, she sounds like some of the anarchy I've read just in terms of these sorts of the sort of the liquidity of human nature, and sort of the ability for people to sort of understand that their systems have made them, but they aren't the final word, and we can generate new ways of relating to other people. I think I do think that people are such products of their environments that and I think we have some sort of responsibility to make environments better. I mean, when I'm in the DAOs or whatever, like Pizza DAO, which is the digital space, which is, we can talk about the difference between digital spaces and physical spaces. And I think there are clarifications to be made and points to say that, digital doesn't replace physical. It's simply a tool that helps us. But when I'm in Pizza DAO, I find that people aren't just people, people understand that that they are accountable, and no one is out to get them, because there isn't this kind of reliance on sort of big culture or daddy or whatever, or like whatever I call some sort of paternal authority, that we can then say, well, it's not me, it's that it's the system that's the first fucked up, and I've got to get my own way. When you introduce accountability and responsibility into sort of these places, you find that unlike what you'd expect, Pizza DAO is much more integrated and much more focused on creating a common goal, and people are far less like, I've noticed people are far less likely to sort of scam each other. I mean, obviously you're going to get a few bad apples, but that's just life, and people are going to be like that.
I think fundamentally the idea here in the US is, I will hold a big stick and threaten you into compliance, and basically the threat of jail or prison is over our heads. Even people in finance and Wall Street, and I've worked in many, many different layers of our economic sphere, they all have the stick, which is the fear stick, and that kind of drives behavior toward what I can get away with, but is just barely acceptable. The other alternative for behavior modification, and we've known this for a long time, psychologists have studied this forever, is incentives. And what I find is that much of the community, your stick is you might be in some way banned or ejected from the community. That's you basically wouldn't be included anymore, potentially, as a negative repercussion. In the positive sense, you could be appreciated, recognized, and these are very valid and valuable responses. When someone speaks in a virtual space and there are 300 listeners, that is popping off serotonin and dopamine receptors in the brain. You on this podcast, when you see the numbers go up from 72 to 503, you are going to feel appreciated, recognized, and seen in a way that is very much an incentive to create. And so what happens is that we've more directly connected the system of incentives to the things that keep us alive. Because a like on Twitter doesn't directly translate necessarily to the things that keep me alive, but a token that is mooning can keep me alive. And so I think this goes a long way towards solving some of the problems of behavior management. And people will do exactly what they need to do to get the things they think they need. So I know a lot of people who have undergone cognitive behavioral therapy or rational emotive therapy, where it's like, what do you really want? What do you want? Because people will do negative things to get what they want too, right? Like, I'll punch somebody in the face because what I want is to be heard or be respected, or I'll, deface something because what I really want is to express my pain and be heard. And so we found the proliferation, I think crypto art in all of its beautiful variety is an expression. People are being seen and heard and that in and of itself is a beautiful incentive, and it's invaluable. And I guess I'm going to stop talking because you probably have a really good valid point. I'm starting to learn your facial expressions, which is like, it's like a lean in and like double cigarette smoke blink. That's and right. then you're ready to drop some wisdom. I can tell.
I was just mesmerized. I was just listening. I mean, I love what you're saying. It's so, it's really cool, and you make a lot of really good points, and you have a lot of really good sort of ideas on like how to on sort of creating frameworks to understand how we can better ourselves as individuals and communities. And I think that's so important. I mean, like for me, I'm trying to create a DAO for my town, Folkestone. And what we want to do is we want to we believe that the creativity in Folkestone is quite dried up and sort of it's not evil. It's just that there's an organization in Folkestone that sort of controls all of the creativity, and we firmly believe that it's not about the money. It's about the community. It's about the relationships between people. You could have this company sort of non-profit organization, so they say, raise 100,000 to do some sort of special art piece by some guy that charges a lot, and then everyone's sort of like, yeah, well done. Or you can have people on the DAO, 3 guitarists with harmonicas and and some guy with a generator and an amp, and then just a guy to get the word out, and it would take like £100, and you could create a collective experience which is far more potent and far more memorable. And it's so I don't think it's about the money at all. I think these people, I know guitarists that be willing to do this. The main thing that I've noticed is the problem is oh, is something going on? Oh, I really want something to happen. Oh, I'll be cool. I'll play guitar. I do. It's like, well, just here's a digital space, and then once again, we can use digital space as a tool to generate this communication, and people will just be able to like organize these things on their own, on their own ideas, their own back. And I think I find it it's interesting that the digital space has become the place for that. And this makes me think about the essay, and I think about how people sort of identify digital space as kind of unreal and kind of furthering our tangles. You know, we're sort of getting more tangled, all this blockchain technology, and then you got to mint things, and you got to use wax and DAOs and all this. When I actually want to sort of play the opposite side and say, I think the physical world, as it stands today, is so controlled by particular social relations and ways of dealing with money and ways of and sort of collective ideals and you know, like all the rest of it. And I obviously identify with the physical world much more than digital world. But a digital world is actually a place where where there is no rule book in a certain sense. So you can and your identity has been stripped of you, and your sort of reputation has been stripped of you in a brilliant way. And that's why I find that this, you know, I'm like, on the contrary, you know, digital space is a place that we can actually find a more innate reality in our human nature and human freedom. And that's what excites me. And that's why I think the DAO is going to be, you know, is going to be a very, very interesting thing over the next 10 years. And I've only been in the space for like a month and a half. I'm like, the DAO thing, it's not something to be taken lightly. It's not something to be ignored.
I'm with you. I'm with you. What you're saying reminds me of some of the juxtaposition. I'm trying to explain. I'm working on a slide deck to explain blockchain technology to people who are formerly incarcerated, people who are in the hood, well respected, you know a lot of people, and will spread the ideas around marginalized communities of all different shapes and colors. And while some people in the blockchain community be like, man, we don't want all the formerly incarcerated people. I'm like, no. These are the people who have experienced the highs and lows and all of the things about society. And one of the interesting things to me is the fundamental pillars of blockchain technology, anonymity and transparency.
Yes.
Those two often seem at odds in in ways that real life cannot capture. And this is the value and the utility. It's very hard to achieve true anonymity. You have to be like James Bond or like Jason Bourne, where you like shave off your fingerprints and like put in contact lenses, and you need all kinds of fancy gimmicks to become anonymous. And in our over policed and surveilled state, it is increasingly difficult to actually be anonymous in any sort of way. But on the blockchain, you can be, for all intents and purposes, anonymous. Your identity. What you cannot be, for all intents and purposes, on the blockchain is non-transparent. My record of transactions shows every single floundering misstep that I've made. Literally, I import my wallet into a coin tracker, and I see all of my really bad purchases and my really low sales, and it's right there. So for the identity that Ethernet address, that Ethereum address represents, there is no lying about how well I'm doing, how poor I am. All of that is right there. And that changes the game. Half of hip hop culture in the US is about posturing that you have more than you really have. Like literally, you fake it till you make it. And in the US, looking cool means that I am like, I wear diamond and gold and bling. I may or may not own it. It may or may not have been gifted to me. Like whatever the case is, I love the idea that
I know what you're getting at here. Yeah.
I know exactly. I hope you help guide me there in this case, because I'm running.
Well, the whole thing about, you know, this is the interesting thing we're talking about. We talk about fakery of the physical. When we're talking about hip hop, we're so, you know, like whatever, like, you know, we, you know, obviously, you know, a lot of these artists are, you know, they are sort of, you know, pretending to own these things. On the blockchain, which is I think where you're getting at, it's all there, and there's no hiding it, you know, that, and you own this piece of art, and you own this sort of thing. You've made this transaction, you know.
There's also a fundamental thing. I kind of want to break out my guitar. I love that you have instruments in your background. Beautiful old stand-up piano and
I know.
nice little.
I flogged this. I looked on the market on Facebook Marketplace, and they were giving this away for free, and they delivered it for free, and I was like, you can't, and I was like, you can't do that. I'll give you £10 for that, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, no, so there's this other thing that is really interesting. I've been to a lot of metaverse events, and some of the only remaining culture that I noticed in New York that was kind of fakery free were like fading years ago, the pop-up open mic. And very often these were also quite rarefied spaces where you're not getting your average neighborhood rapper coming in and dropping a freestyle or like a whatever. At these open mics, you'll get your Brooklyn poets who are like all heady and like went to, I don't know, Columbia, whatever, or somewhere and got their MFA. And you're not getting, the vast majority of people are not being able to share their collective experience. Poor people.
Yes.
And I think that's really what I'm saying. It's like poor people of all kinds are being robbed of the ability to collectively share their stories. And so I think one of the really, really beautiful things about transparency is that because, and I agree with you on our heralding of the digital space, is that what I've literally seen is that you cannot pretend when you perform, when you're improvising on the spot, when you're what you're doing right now, it's very difficult for you to hide your personality in this act of conversation. And as clever as you are, it will not hold up after 6, 7, 8 episodes. Yeah. So there's a sort of truth in the very expression. And so I am all about, like, literally my entire ethos beyond prison work, beyond writing, beyond whatever, is about getting at this sort of really genuine, distinctive human feature that we all kind of stumble, we make mistakes. And yes, we really like highly polished things, but to get highly polished things, you have to make a crap ton of really bad things. And yeah, in my own artistry, I excel at making lots of really bad things, very visibly on the blockchain.
I used to make I've been doing YouTube for about 10 years now. I used to make these really crappy sketch videos when I was like 15, and like I privatized them for a few years, and then for a few years, because I was so like still attached to that, but still fairly far away from it to sort of cringe at it. I was like, oh, let's forget that. And then a few years later, quite recently, I looked back on them and I was like, shit, man, I'm fucking funny, like I was a funny kid, and now now I've republicized them, and now people can watch them, and like, and obviously it's like, it's with this, and the phone quality in 2012 was like awful, and that's what I used to record on, and like, it's goofy and it's badly edited, but it's but you look at it, it's like, yeah, whatever, it's fun, and making mistakes is so endearing. And when I see people make mistakes, I think of them the complete opposite way to the way they think of themselves. I think, yes, sick, good fucking work, man. Like,
that's exactly that. You see, that right there is exactly where I am. Yeah. I wish more people were willing to look a little stupid. Yeah. When I walk down the street and I say hi to you, and you don't say hi back to me, which happens about half the time in my neighborhood, because I live in the I feel a little bad, and I can't help but feel a little bad. I kind of put myself out there, and you look at me like, are you crazy? Are you daft? But like, when someone does respond, and we're in a new space, instantly, like we don't know what's happening. Hi. And that, the bravery that it takes to do that, and again, I think it just really comes down to trust. Also understanding the stakes, right? even though it hurts when I say hi to someone in my hood, and I know this seems like a really trivial thing, but like people in New York City right now, we have anti-Asian sentiments running rampant. My Asian friends don't feel safe even going into work
That's fucking
because
crazy.
a random stranger could be like, "Hey, how you doing?" and then stab them or beat them up or push them in the train tracks, right? So it's not like it's without risk to open yourself up and not stay on the defensive all the time. So I think fundamentally it's really understanding the weight that we give somebody when we give them our attention, when we open ourselves up and assume to take a neutral stance towards them. And even though this is we're talking like interpersonally, I think it has relevance. Like we have a mass shooting, once a week here in the US. And we want to vilify this, whatever monster did it, as if they're somehow an aberration.
Or not an anomaly or something.
Or an anomaly, right? Like it's them. They, what was wrong with that person? And literally we're a giant factory manufacturing the angst and the mental frameworks that create this phenomenon. We are a producer of violence, and then we pick out the part and we're like, look at this. Can you believe this came off the line? It's like, yeah, that's what we're making in there.
It's funny because when you think about sort of even like sort of the fetishization of serial killers in the 70s and 80s. I mean, even now there's a new Netflix show called Don't Fuck with Cats, and you may have seen it. I don't know if you have Netflix or whatever. It's about a guy who killed cats and then he killed a person, but he like did this clever thing where he like emulated Basic Instinct, or like when she killed. I haven't seen the film, but she does the whole thing, and then when she's in prison in the film, she says, "Can I have a cigarette?" and then crosses her legs or whatever, and then he does the same thing in prison, and it's like a footage of it, and everyone's there's this real antinomy of like, this guy's fucking horrible, but then also when they sort of look at how he like crafted this all and sort of made himself some kind of it's like some kind of project or whatever, like some kind of piece, like look what I've done, I've look at my master plan, like this was part of my plan. Everyone's sort of like, wow, cool, like wow, what a mastermind, what a sick, twisted mastermind. Yeah, you're right. There is this abhorrence even now in this recent special, but we also there's a strange idolization, and I'm not saying they want these killers to exist, but there's this strange kind of wow, look at how look how clever this person was. Look how this person. And of course, if you're going to have that culture, it's going to be encouraged. It's like
yes.
It's obvious.
Yes, and so it's the mastermind, the archetype of the emotionless, stone cold, feel no empathy male. We have the archetype of the sex vixen woman who's all the male projected desires on it, right? And then so we have like this whole panoply of readily accessible stereotypes. And what's really interesting is that like all the humans I've met, and I believe I've met a wide variety of people with lived experiences, they're all complex. They feel, they cry, they want to bring people close, and they want to push people away. It's like this, we're all kind of the same stuff. Even the mastermind slips up because they can't, they feel too much or whatever. And so like, I think I would love if I could continue to kind of like explore and pick apart. Pet peeve. All right. And I'm never usually this rambly, but I guess I'm really excited by this conversation. I probably also never get a chance just to speak my voice in a censorship-free way. I'm always representing something or another, and this is the first time I actually feel like I'm me. But I look at NFTs, and one, there's like the artistic quality that are represented in the art. And I'm like, wow, okay, what are the feelings and emotions that I'm receiving as in in reflecting on this beautiful piece of a flaming skull with glitch and these emblems of death and darkness and these emblems of whatever, like what are the symbolic elements in this piece, and how does that resonate with me and my cultural background? And as I explore it, I'm amazed at what a story the range of artwork that exists in the blockchain space tells us about the culture that underpins it. And you know, I'm not here to I'm not even qualified to do a critical analysis of the entire spectrum of blockchain art.
Yeah,
But I
sure
think there's no, but there is something to me about the visions of cartoonized violence, of hyper realized images of cuteness, of a sort of morbid fascination with the elements of death and strength and fragility, and how that's represented in a 2D, in most cases, frame, although AR and VR stuff are really happening. I don't know. I think it's really interesting. Oh, and this comes down to the final thing that'll sum up our whole conversation.
Yeah. Please.
I think, and it goes to the core of the DAO. So I was watching MetaFest, and I'm trying to edit some of the videos, and I got yelled at by one of the MetaFest crew. They were like, because I didn't do it right. And I was like, damn. And it was just like this same phenomenon that you described, where people, he's not my boss, or they're not my boss. I don't even know their gender. They're not my boss. And yet I really wanted to do a good job on the thing, more so than maybe even my day job. I want to do a good thing because I wanted to make sure that the videos shine. So anyway, one of these videos, many of these videos were about how we organize and how we resolve conflict. And I think maybe one of the fundamental questions of the human project comes down, and even all things about criminality and violence and so on and so forth, come down to this fundamental thing: in a world of limited resources, how do we resolve conflict? And find ways to share. That's like really in a fundamental sense. And if we could learn better ways of doing this, and there are actually better ways of doing it, so not of eliminating conflict, but of handling it really well, then we might be improving both our relationship with each other and our relationship to this rock with limited resources. And I think that's the hope that drives this whole endeavor.
And I mean, it's obviously going, you know, and you know, the thing is, you know, I spoke to Alex Alex Wyckoff, one of the you know, one of the main developers of, really good. And he you know, we sort of touched on the fact that there are problems that we can see and problems that we can't see, but we have to acknowledge when we're undergoing this kind of transformation, or like this sort of huge sort of multifaceted project, you know. And in terms of like, you know, I find the whole thing so interesting when you know about, you know, prison and conflict and trust and everything else, because you know, in terms of these systems that we create and who we fundamentally are as people, and when you say about sort of, you know, we are just this sort of gooey kind of you know, you know, we're like so complex, and I think it's so dangerous to even define who we are with the lingual and conceptual systems that we have now. I think we are this sort of, we are a void, we are an abyss of infinite content and data. And this is why this is what I have a real problem with when people and I'm not against Carl Jung at all, but people sort of appeal to Carl Jung in terms of sort of archetypes. And it draws down to this sort of very kind of narrow-minded essentialism when you interpret it in the wrong way. Like, oh, you are this person fundamentally, and we can work everything out about you, and this is how you operate, as opposed to this kind of just this swarm, this tycoon of all of this stuff that we both can express and can't express. And it's not even down to us to find it all out and work out what it is. we have to give it the space to grow and to manifest itself. And not even say, oh, well, you know, and not even try and have the final word on what it is, you know. And this is why it's so important to sort of allow people sort of spaces to create new connections. Like when you say hi to someone in the street and they say hi back, it's, you know, I've had this sort of it's a wonderful feeling, but it's uncanny. And it's like, oh, it's like, well, now what? Now what do I do? The frameworks have sort of disappeared, you know. And it's just this there's this sort of very kind of uncanny freedom that's left. And I urge people to not be afraid of that uncanny freedom. It's important. It's where everything comes from, you know.
You will be afraid of the uncanny freedom. You will be, like, you will feel the fear. And that I've been on stage a couple of times. I've been on stage in prison, in front of prison. And
that's amazing.
I remember there was an actor who came in and did a workshop in prison, and he was talking, a brave guy. He came in and he's, you know, talented actor with a long career. And one of the guys asked him, they were like, what do you do when you feel nervous, like, and you're about to go perform or something? And the guy was like, you know, it's okay to feel butterflies. Just try to get them to fly in formation.
That's lovely.
I know, it really stuck with me when he told the story. But I think that's really what you're gonna feel. To feel fear is natural. And I think you're exactly right. In this uncanny environment, avoiding reactionary responses that are like almost guaranteed to cause harm, even in a good sense. What we're looking for is an emergent solution that we could not have possibly foreseen. And I think you're so right. We can craft a space where even if we feel fear, or we might feel fear, we can step boldly forward with the knowledge that we can respond and that we're supported by community. I know these are like, I feel like we're talking in very vague general terms, but also it's like really hearty stuff that I think about often.
I tend to be quite vague in how I sort of talk about my ideas. I mean, yeah, like, you know, and it's I mean, in terms of you know, I think there's a lot of people can sort of like relate to what we're talking about. When we talk about sort of direct experiences such as you know, how to relate to each other in prison and how to actually deal with, actually how to sort of create new institutional systems, we can actually point to examples. We can point to examples such as like what you're trying to do, where you sort of where you know, and the vague can be really kind of it can be general, but you can actually, if you have good ideas, you can really translate it to the physical. Like I love swimming in the vagueness, but I find that, you know, it can be, if you create a good framework, sort of discuss sort of things sort of philosophically, conceptually, you can immediately go into like, you can go in immediately into
the practical, right?
Practical, right? And this is, and then you can find the physical experience, or the sort of the tangible experience of the DAO, and you sort of and you can find the tangible experience of, you know, understanding what it is to be like an inmate, which wants to self-express and write, you know, and you can basically use this vague framework to say, well, actually, like I've understood the sort of you know, the sort of human nature and rapport and what it means to sort of express yourself and how.
And be connected. I remember I put on events in the city in these fancy spaces, and I have people who are formerly incarcerated often act some of the drama pieces that currently incarcerated people write.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And I take lots of pictures, and I collect commentary from the people in the audience, and I send it back to the writers who are still inside. Some of these people will never have life sentences. They'll never come out. They'll die in prison. They've been sentenced to, and in some cases that's by like some weird arcane rule. Like you can do 3 kind of not so bad things, but after the 3rd not so bad thing, you get life automatically, which is a rule in some states. There's some cases where whatever, I don't even want to get into like the legal system here, and its weird arbitrariness, but so we've sent these letters back, and then I get a letter back from the writer who's like, I was sitting on my bunk and I looked at the packet that you sent me of how my words, I'll be getting a little bit emotional, but of how my words reached the outside world, and like I had to reread, they'd state, their words were, I had to reread these letters, and I couldn't believe it was real, and they cried, and like I'm reading their letter and I cried because I understand, like, this person, some of them do come out of prison, and I want the person who comes out of prison or out of any awful structure to know that there is a world where their thoughts and feelings can be heard, seen, respected. Again, it's the same set of incentives that I think makes the digital space work, is hinged on this fundamental connectivity that if I share my thoughts and ideas and that's received, that has value, and that I have a the ability to receive that feedback back. And what we're cutting people in prison off from is from that fundamental thing. They've already been cut off from that their whole life,
Yes.
right? All of, they've only gotten the stick. They've never gotten the incentives. And I think before people end up in prison, before people cause harm, we can get much better at dealing with the small conflicts, listening to each other a bit more, being touched and moved by each other's humanity and experience, like really celebrating in very small ways what 3 guitars in the local square feels like.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
What it feels like to tap your hands and move along and support that feeling that's being crafted in that little space. Because I don't know if I could do that in my hood. I play the violin and the guitar and the cajon and all kinds of instruments, and I can literally get arrested for performing in a public space without a permit. And I don't know how to get a permit, to be honest. I've worked with cultural institutions and I don't know how to get a permit to perform in my neighborhood. So I know I won't go to prison for making music in a public space.
This is like
I'm serious.
No,
like,
I'm not. Yeah, I know. It's just so shocking. It's just so shocking, the kind of how it's structured, you know. And you can, I mean, in the US, what is it, like 3 not so bad things? So what does that mean? You play violin 3 times on the street, you're gonna get a life sentence?
Right, taken to the extreme, but but yes, and that's what soft censorship looks like here in the US. We decry the autocratic regimes around the world who are like censor free expression and put people in prison, but we don't need to, because every aspect of our society is policed on such a high state, and the police are in prison as well. I did a workshop recently with an improv sort of theater-based workshop with prosecutors, defense attorneys, police officers, formerly incarcerated people, victims of domestic violence, and philanthropists. So I brought all these people in a virtual space. Again, here we are in a virtual space. And I was like, look, we're going to strip away all the labels and we're just going to like find humanity and do this in the most non-judgmental way possible. And we had the most enriching, wonderful, fun, awesome conversations, in, again, empowered by the virtual space. I have no idea how that's going to work out when we're post-pandemic and in a physical space.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I was like, you know, I was walking down and people are more, you know, pub gardens open tomorrow in the UK. And obviously I love the pub because, you know, and it's like you're sort of saying, it's the meeting of the private and the public sphere. And alcohol is obviously, you know, it's a poison, but it's great at lubricating and sort of finding these sorts of strange, uncanny connections that are ultimately entirely who we are and where everything comes from, besides these sort of institutional frameworks that kind of guide us, you know, both implicit and explicit. But I was going to say something. And
first of all, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see people out and about and kind of jostling in this beautiful life thing. You know, things are getting green here in my backyard. It's really awesome. And you're right. Having a world where you know, alcohol has been around forever, and like drunkenness itself, but the kinds of disconnected substance abuse disorders that have taken over entire towns and like destroyed a generation, 2 generations of young men and women, like that wasn't always around. Like the desperation that would lead me to cling to addictions to replace the things I used to get from other sources. That because the same receptors that, you know, some nice pills will zap are the same things that I get from talking to you in this conversation right now. If I can't have this, if there's no venue or vehicle for me to have this, then a pill will suffice, a drink will suffice, some risky behavior will suffice. And so yeah, I think we are, as we re-enter, I think there are some lessons about rewarding humanity that we can really do well to take into 2020, the rest of 2021 and into 2022.
And perhaps in like more practical ways, if people do want some kind of direction, I mean, we can sort of outline many things that we've said already. You know, take creative risks, bond with your fellow kin, challenge institutions. You know, I had this kind of, I wanted to write this kind of manifesto, the kind of a kind of anti-manifesto where I was sort of talking about you know, sort of civil disobedience, or just saying no to things, just saying no, I'm not going to do that. You know, like you going to Weatherspoons, which is basically the McDonald's pub of the UK. And I had this sort of idea of what if you ordered the drink and then you got the drink and then you just said no to paying for it. You know, but these sorts of things. But like, I'm not saying people should go out and do that, but I'm saying that, like, you know, you can encourage kind of more autonomy through just sort of experimenting. And I think experimenting is so important. And it's annoying to sort of be so vague to some people, perhaps, because there isn't really a rule book. And like, you know, I think the worst anarchists are those that say, the best society is going to consist of people doing this and people doing this and people doing this. And I'm like, you can't, like, if you want to be really anarchic, you need to give people a space to do it themselves. The problem, obviously, is the fact that people haven't got their strength to actually decide for themselves, you know. And this is what is so important to sort of like consider, like experimenting and sort of mastering what you actually care about and finding an authenticity inside yourself that isn't compelled by, you know, clout. I mean, like, clout is so important in kind of like, it's so importantly like an obstruction, you know, like to try to find clout and trying to sort of reputation and trying to, you know, do all of this as opposed to actual authentic expression, which will always outlive any sort of clout, which is just so, you know, which is just so ethereal and just change, you know, ephemeral, sorry, and sort of changes, you know. And so yeah, so like, I mean, take risk, you know, take creative risk, be ambitious, and don't be afraid of knowing when you're being undercut by middlemen and institutions. You know, and there's one example that I have, which is both of two of these things. I wanted to host a BDSM themed costume party in my town. Now, my town isn't very big. It's quite a small coastal town, but I know the town enough to know that people, you know, kind of have a kinky side. And obviously, because I'm bloody insane, I did it. And I created this BDSM themed costume party. It was the talk of the town. We got in the national press. We had paparazzi turn up, you know, because it was just such a crazy idea. I would like people to do, I think I would encourage people to do more of that, but not just, you know, the event that I did, but people doing whatever they care about and knowing that knowing to take the risk and knowing that they don't even know what the future holds. And the other reason it's a good example is because I lost money on that event. And I knew that the venue I did it at must have made nearer to £1,000 than £500 in bar. And they still charged me for the room. And I saying, oh, well, I guess they've let me do this. I guess I'll pay them. Fuck that. Like, fuck all that. Their event was one of the highlights of their year, I'm bloody sure. And one of the highlights of the town. And, you know, and the fact that, you know, people still sort of talk about that event, even though it was 2 years ago, and people sort of, you know, look back on the pictures that were taken. And I want to say, don't let institutions do that to you. And in the same way, don't let publishing industry, you know, we're talking about Libernet, don't let publishing industries convince you that they're doing you a favor by giving you 5% of your own material. Find another way of doing, you know, these are the two options I found. The one option is sort of security and safety and, you know, regulated banks and you know, and doing how they want. And the other side is uncanny. and it's more uncomfortable, but this is the absolute, this is the point, you know, the uncanniness and the sort of, and the ability to sort of craft your own path, you know. So.
Yes, and there's the beauty of the loss comes to mind. I recently got accepted on Foundation as an artist and as a creator. It sounds so funny when they went at these platforms, and these are curated platforms, super rare, known origin, where you need an like invite to get on. And like I've been making, you know, my ghetto artsy but like not really heady projects rooted in my ethos for some time now. But to get on Foundation, I like literally I had to ask a lot of people to upvote me. And then somebody I'd encouraged months ago finally sent me an invite. Anyway, so I decided, I was like, I'm gonna do a token of appreciation and mint an NFT and give it to a certain number of my supporters. And of course, because Ethereum has high gas, I ended up spending you know, the equivalent of several $100s giving away my thank yous for the thing that I haven't even used yet. I just set the last transaction last night, and I was telling my wife, I was like, you know, it just felt right to do. I don't even care if I make that money back. I literally, I appreciated all the people from the real world who are not even in the crypto space on LinkedIn shared and retweeted my stuff, and they were like, support this guy's art, he has lots to say about, and like the feeling that I felt, that connectivity. I don't know what is going to be my Genesis piece on Foundation. I have no idea what I'm going to make. I'm probably going to try to do some communal thing. I'm thinking of an idea where I go to the hood and I wear like a Ethereum shirt, and I try to give people $5 in crypto, and I ask them if I can film them. And you'll see all my Black, brown, Caribbean, you know, Latin, Puerto Rican, Dominicans, you'll see how they interact with me with fear, disdain. Some interactions will probably be uncanny. Some people probably won't want to be recorded, and we'll see what happens. I'm thinking this is going to be my first piece, me trying to give away $5 in crypto in Jamaica, Queens. But I think, I think there's something really beautiful about the loss. And here's to what you were saying, the venue. I think the critical piece is looking at, when it comes down to it, it's about who owns the land, which goes back to my Crypto Voxels parcel and my small community. Why don't you have your own venue? Why can't you and 50 other people in your DAO buy a place and run it, and you get all the door? So yeah, I'm with you there 100%.
Well, you know, I mean, Easy said that, like, you know, one day DAOs are gonna run everything. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't, I mean, like, you know, it's much more efficient. It's much more like, I'm just thinking, like, you know, in terms of like, if you were to strip all this of the ideology and the conceptual frameworks and just see which tool is better for governing, then the DAO is better, like in pretty much every way. And you know, it like, you know, obviously there are some setbacks, but like, you know, like, but that's the thing. I mean, like, you know, and obviously, like, you know, that's great idea. You know, like when I first tried to get funded for this project 2 years ago when I came up with the idea. And you know, I met this guy. His name was I'll leave his name out, but like he ran East Cliff Creatives, and they actually were a club, and they all put in for a venue, and that was something that I really liked seeing. But the problem was that, you know, they were sort of a select club of people, and I had to find about them through a guy that knew another guy, and obviously they wouldn't help me fund my projects, you know, because you know they're probably struggling themselves, or they just don't care, or whatever reason it is, you know. And but yeah, absolutely, like why couldn't you, you know, why couldn't you, you know, get people together and initiate a sort of space where you can trust, based on the idea that, you know, that there isn't some fallback, some kind of guy saying, you know, some kind of authority to say, oh, it's the system, fuck the system, because we would be cut, we would sort of embody our own sort of system. So.
And fundamentally, I understand systemic violence in my bones. every DAO that is successful will in some way, shape, or form butt up against, in a violent way, either monetarily or through regulation or some other format, you will run up against the resistance of the existing systems, because it's kind of like cellular organisms competing in a petri dish. Like it's just the way life works, is that there are these conflicts, and it'll be really interesting to see the resilience of the DAOs. And I think that goes back to like my name, Indefatigable, which I use online. I think all these principles are like, the more solid the core framework is, and you spout off these 3 really awesome principles of the framework. Like here, I'm gonna have to play back this recording. You were like bang, bang, bang. The more solid those are, the more chances you have at not just being undefeated, but also possibly changing in the process into something brand new. So it's not like I'm undefeated and rigid. It's that I'm undefeated and infinitely malleable. This has been really fun, for our first conversation.
It's been good, man. Is there anything, okay, yeah, we're about a little over an hour. So is there anything you'd like to plug sort of vocally? I can obviously put links in the description for anything anything you've got going on, sort of, whatever it is, your Twitter. Usually people put their Twitter in so people can, like, if they want to reach out to you, maybe they can do that. You can just say, hi, how you doing? Let's have an uncanny conversation.
Definitely reach out to me for an uncanny conversation. I support up and coming artists. I support like people who don't know what they're doing. I support like scammers who are dropping BS NFTs, trying to get on the scene and are really looking for the same community that we're all looking for. Even if you think you're after money, what you're really after is community, and I know it. Reach out to me, who cares? And if you scam me, who cares? I'm broke anyway. But the other fundamental thing I wanted to say before I left, now that we're way over, is I have 2 things that I'm kind of working on that are fun, or 3. One is a book called How Not to Be a Dick. And it's about toxic masculinity and conflict resolution and kind of like the pitfalls of maleness that we've culturally had. It's a bad book. I drew all the illustrations. It's really kind of both fun and honest and painful and awful, but real. Anyway, hopefully that'll come out on Libernet. And then watch for my Genesis drop on Foundation. And finally, I have a project called GRUUPMADE, which are instant songs crafted by community sentiments, where it's kind of just slapped together from multiple sources, and it's instant and bad and minted forever, which I think has a sort of ephemeral and yet permanent coolness to it. I enjoy doing it. So yeah.
Sounds great, man. Thanks so much for being on, and thanks everyone for watching. If you liked what you saw, want to suggest what we could do more of, please leave a comment. If you want to support the channel, obviously, like and subscribe and share with people you think would benefit from this conversation. And if you want to see more videos like this, please just check our catalog. Unless you're watching this on something else like Spotify or Podbean or whatever it is, then please look at the catalog for more stuff like this. This has been a really fun conversation, Indy. It's been fantastic having you, and hope you have a good rest of your day. And everyone, thanks for watching. Hope you have a good rest of your day as well. All right, peace. See you later.